If I hadn't ripped the lock off that gate with my pickup truck, our whole town might have burned down. That sentence still echoes in my head, especially now that I'm standing here watching a fire truck refill its tank from the emergency water valve buried just inside my property line. The one Karen tried to claim as her own. The same one she padlocked shut. Because, and I quote, "your gate clashes with the neighborhood's visual consistency." I wish I were joking, but nope. Karen's HOA reign of terror turned into a full-blown statewide emergency in under 24 hours. And it all started with a silver padlock, a folding lawn chair, and one woman's absolute inability to mind her own business. It was just another Monday morning. Birds were chirping, coffee was brewing, and my dog Ripley was doing his usual patrol of the fence line like he was guarding Fort Knox. I was halfway through replacing some boards on the chicken coop when I saw her. Karen was marching down the gravel road with purpose, wearing those oversized sunglasses that make people look like anime villains and holding a clipboard like it was the sword of righteousness. I didn't think much of it until I saw her heading straight for my gate. She paused, looked around, pulled something shiny out of her purse, and before I could even shout, she snapped a padlock onto my front gate and turned on her heel like she just planted a flag on the moon. I jogged up dust, flying from my boots, trying to stay calm. "Hey, did you just lock my gate?" I called out. She didn't even flinch. "Yes, I did. Per HOA Ordinance 14B, no unapproved front-facing structures may remain unlocked." "Karen," I said, already regretting using her name, "this isn't a front-facing structure. It's a private access gate on a private easement." She smiled like I'd just told her I didn't believe in air. "That's what you think, but it's clearly visible from the community trail. It's an eyesore. I've submitted multiple complaints and taken the liberty of securing it myself." I stared at her, utterly baffled. "You submitted complaints about my gate?" She nodded like a teacher who was proud her student had finally caught up. "3 all unaddressed, so I acted. The thing is, I could have taken the lock off right then and there. I could have pulled out bolt cutters or yanked it loose with my ATV, but I didn't. Not because I was afraid of her. Karen's got the body mass of a broomstick and the legal authority of a yard gnome, but because I knew exactly what was under that patch of gravel behind the gate. 10 feet in, buried beneath a metal hatch, was the emergency valve to the town's backup water supply. Installed after the 2017 flood wiped out the mainline infrastructure. And guess who the county contracted to help design and install that system? Yours truly. I looked down at the lock, then back up at Karen, who was already typing something into her phone. "I've documented your non-compliance," she chirped, completely unaware that she just blocked off the single access point the fire department had used 3 summers in a row during fire season. But it didn't stop there. No. Karen unfolded her lawn chair, plopped it down on her own property right across from my gate, and spent the next 4 hours drinking kombucha and glaring at anyone who came near it, including the Amazon delivery guy. I watched from my porch, stunned, as she tried to redirect him to the back alley entrance, which doesn't exist. By sunset, the temperature had spiked to 103 degrees, and the fire warnings were already flashing on the local news. I debated calling the fire department to give them a heads up about the gate situation, but I figured it'd blow over in a day. Worst case scenario, she'd get bored and leave. Right, wrong. That night, lightning struck a ridge 4 miles east. Dry brush went up like gasoline-soaked confetti. I could see the orange glow from my upstairs window before I even smelled the smoke. I flipped on my phone and checked the fire map. The wind was pushing the flames west, straight toward our town. Within 30 minutes, I heard the sirens. Fire trucks roared down the community trail, headed straight for my gate. I grabbed my boots and sprinted out, hoping someone had thought to bring bolt cutters, but no. When I got there, Karen was still in her lawn chair now, in a bathrobe, sipping from a stemless wine glass like she was at a spa. One of the firefighters jumped out and ran up to the gate. "We need access to the valve now." Karen didn't even look up. "This is private property. I can't allow anyone through without HOA clearance." I blinked. The firefighter blinked. Everyone blinked. "Ma'am," he said, trying to stay professional, "that water access is registered as an emergency infrastructure asset. You're obstructing state response." Karen waved her hand like she was brushing off a fly. "Then bring paperwork." I didn't wait. I turned, jogged back to my shed, grabbed a chain, hooked it to the lock, tied the other end to my pickup, and floored it. The sound of the metal snapping was the most satisfying thing I'd heard in years. The gate flew open like the jaws of life, and the truck rolled in. Karen screamed something about legal action, but nobody cared. A firefighter tossed her a warning pamphlet and told her to sit down. The fire was contained within hours thanks to the emergency water supply, but one house up in the foothills was lost before they could get to it. I spent the next day giving a statement to a very tense group of county officials. Karen. She was nowhere to be found, but her lock, I hung it on my porch with a sign that read, "Warning may cause wildfires." And that was just the beginning. Because once the town realized who locked the gate and why it was like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. And guess what? Karen had built that house herself. The day after the fire, our sleepy little town felt like it had woken up with a hangover. Smoke still clung to the trees like a bad memory, and the air had that scorched earth smell that made everyone's nerves just a little raw. I figured I'd get maybe a few awkward nods at the diner or a thumbs up from the fire crew, but what I walked into that morning felt more like a press conference. As soon as I stepped through the door of Rosie's cafe, the place went dead silent. Every head turned, old men paused mid-bite, kids stopped spinning on stools, and Rosie herself set down her coffee pot like it had offended her. "You the guy with the gate," someone called from the back. I gave a slow nod, still trying to process the attention. "Yeah, I didn't realize locking a gate would become a town-wide scandal." An older woman near the counter crossed her arms. "It wouldn't have been if that woman hadn't padlocked the only access to our emergency water system. My brother's house nearly went up from behind the register." Rosie piped up. "You know, Karen filed a complaint against you this morning. Claimed you damaged HOA property when you broke the lock. Sheriff already tossed it in the trash, but thought you should know." That got a few chuckles. A man in overalls leaned over and whispered, "She's been calling herself waterfront coordinator. Told my wife she had the authority to inspect our garden hose for non-compliance." I sat down more amused than angry. "So she's been busy." That was putting it mildly. Over the next few hours, I learned Karen hadn't just padlocked my gate. She'd been on a one-woman crusade to improve the neighborhood. That included sending violation notices for untrimmed hedges, unauthorized lawn furniture, and even a kid's basketball hoop that posed an aesthetic hazard. People were livid, but no one wanted to cross her. Apparently, she'd filed more official complaints in 3 months than the entire HOA board had in the past 5 years. But that fire changed things. Everyone was talking now, and by lunchtime word had spread that the town council would be holding an emergency meeting. I got a call from Councilman Devers personally inviting me to speak. His exact words were, "You're the only one who knows what that gate's really for. We need to set the record straight before she rewrites the narrative with glitter and passive-aggressive signage." So I showed up to town hall that evening wearing a clean shirt, carrying a rolled-up blueprint of the underground water network, and holding a folder of every signed contract and infrastructure diagram I'd been a part of since 2017. The room was packed. People lined the walls, sat on the floor, even stood out in the hallway. And right there in the front row, in a pristine white pantsuit and a smug little smile, sat Karen, clipboard in hand. Mayor Schultz opened the meeting with a simple question. "Can someone explain what happened at Gate E17 during yesterday's fire response?" I stood up and laid the blueprint across the council table. Gate E17 isn't just a gate. It's the only accessible route for emergency responders to reach the reserve water main beneath Ridgeview. This isn't speculation. It's codified in the town's emergency response plan and tied directly to the fire department's GPS routing system. Karen immediately raised her hand. "Excuse me, but I was under the impression that gate was part of private property." "If so, it should adhere to the aesthetic and security requirements laid out in the HOA charter," she added. The mayor sighed. "Mrs. Travers, you'll have a chance to speak after Mr. Miller finishes." I turned to her. "You're right about one thing. It is private property mine, and it's also federally designated as a secondary access corridor for emergency utilities, which overrides any local or private governance, including the HOA. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone muttered, "Federal, seriously?" Karen didn't blink. And yet that information wasn't made readily available to homeowners. As waterfront coordinator, I simply did what I thought was best to maintain safety and visual harmony. Devers jumped in. "Visual harmony! The fire crews had to drive 17 miles around a mountain to get access. One home was lost." "Are you calling that harmonious?" Karen pressed her lips into a thin line. "No one notified me of any emergency use plans. Perhaps the town should have communicated better." That's when I dropped the big one. The county did notify the HOA in 2018. There's an email trail showing the then board acknowledged the easement, signed off on the emergency overlay, and agreed to maintain unobstructed access in perpetuity. I have the documents right here. I handed them to Devers, who passed them down the line like they were radioactive. Karen's face paled as she tried to peek over someone's shoulder, but it got worse. I'd brought one more item, a copy of the inspection report showing that the valve system had been upgraded in 2021, with federal grant money making it a Homeland Security asset under regional infrastructure protection. And yes, I explained, blocking it was not just a violation of local codes but a potential felony. Karen tried to interrupt again, but the mayor cut her off. Enough. We've heard quite enough. The fact that this infrastructure wasn't common knowledge doesn't justify your actions, and the consequences speak for themselves. We'll be reviewing potential civil liability for obstruction and evaluating the HOA's responsibility in this matter. The room broke into applause. Someone shouted, "About time!" As I sat down, Karen quietly packed her clipboard into a giant floral tote bag and stormed out. For a second, I thought that would be the end of it. But I underestimated just how deep Karen had wormed herself into the HOA. Because less than 24 hours later, I received a notice on my porch signed by the HOA board that I was being fined $800 for unauthorized demolition of HOA-installed hardware and vehicular misuse on shared land. They'd actually tried to fine me for saving the town. That's when I realized this wasn't over, not even close. Karen might have lost the battle at town hall, but she just declared war through paperwork. And unfortunately for her, I had more than tools and blueprints on my side. I had the law, and I was just getting warmed up.